Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. We are going to start our today's session, and we will be able to connect to Zema, who is in Kyiv, and I will give over to you, dear Sergejus Temčinas, chairing of this first session of today. We are starting. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, we're now starting our first session for today. It is the session number 4, entitled Mediating Between South and West. And our first speaker today is Valerii Zema, who represents the Institute of History of the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences. He is an internationally known scholar who authored numerous publications on the history of the Kyivan Metropolitanate, including his quite recent book entitled The Kyivan Metropolitanate and the Challenges of the Renaissance and Reformations. But he has also written extensively on the earliest codes of saints and hagiography, the writings of religious literature, especially polemic one with Catholics and Protestants, the history of unit movements in the Eastern Slavic milieu, also the manuscript tradition of the didactic gospel and homiletics. So I am very happy to see him online today. So we regret, Valerii, you could not come and join us at this conference in person, but we are eager to hear your paper, so the floor is yours.
Thank you for introduction, and please we start with the second slide, if you could move. The centrifugal tendencies initiated by the fall of Kyiv in 1240 provoked the emergence of new Orthodox centers patronized by semi-independent principalities. These processes became more intense in the 14th century when Ruthenian lands were gradually absorbed by the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Crown of Poland. With the departure of the Kyivan metropolitans to lands closer to the Golden Horde in the second half of the 13th century, the faithful of the Ukrainian and Belarusian bishoprics found themselves without constant pastoral care. So new centers of spiritual authority began to form within the borders of principalities with local rulers acting as their protectors. As Constantinople began to decline, the Golden Horde became an additional center of power and influence that the spiritual leaders of the Metropolitanate had to consider. In addition to the old Kyivan Metropolitanate, 2 other Orthodox centers emerged, essentially reflecting the shifting geopolitical balance of power on the frontiers of Europe and the steppe. From the second half of the 13th century, the phenomenon of a nominal center for the Kyivan Metropolitanate, whose head left his seat, emerged. However, the struggle for possession or influence over this ancient center in Kyiv didn't cease completely. Another phenomenon that was significant for the history of the Ukrainian lands within the Grand Duchy of Lithuania is the patronage for princes of Lithuanian origin over the Orthodox Church. The first of them was Grand Duke Algirdas, who, despite his paganism, demanded a separate metropolitan for the Ukrainian and Belarusian lands under Lithuanian control. Later, his policy was continued by princes of Lithuanian origin who were baptized and supported the Metropolitanate and spiritual life of Orthodox faithful. The families of Ostrożski, Olelkovici, Slutsky, Czartoryski, Sangushko, and others. The process of competition between political centers for influence on the religious life and patronage of the Kyivan Metropolitanate will be examined on the basis of materials from the second half of the 14th century concerning the policy of Grand Duke Algirdas and his heirs. The study is based on three types of sources: correspondence between Lithuania and Constantinople, chronicle records, and official documents. The comparison of these three types of sources allows us to reveal the interaction of different centers that competed for the influence on the Kyivan Metropolitanate. Among centers of authority, two circles can be distinguished. Those directly involved in the competition for the Metropolitanate or the creation of new religious centers: Kyiv, Halych, Trakai, Vladimir, and Klyazma. The second circle includes Constantinople and Sarai, which acted as arbiters in the competition between local centers. The Lithuanian princes and dukes developed an active policy of eastward expansion, relying in particular on marriages with the women from Algirdas and later Vytautas families. The women of Lithuanian rulers were married to the princes of Rurikids families that became allies of dukes. This marriage strategy significantly influenced the political map of Eastern Europe from the mid-14th century. In this way, the system of Lithuanian neighborhood has been created. The marriage of Vytautas' daughter Sofia to Prince Vasily Dmitrievich of Moscow and Vladimir Klyazma took place while her father was converting from Catholicism to Orthodoxy, which he later described in his own complaint that arose from the disputes at the Council of Constance. The marriage of Sofia Vytautovna coincided with the changes in Kyivan Metropolitanate. Cyprian Zamblak those years established authority over all bishoprics of the old Kyivan Metropolitanate, and the See of Halych was seized. Simultaneously, the Catholic Church bishopric of Halych started to grow since 1370s. The Orthodox faithful were again in focus of Vytautas politics during the Council of Constance. This council that restored the hierarchical order in church with concentration of authority in one center became a prologue to the resumption of church union negotiations between the restored Kyivan Metropolitanate and Rome. Metropolitan Gregory Zamblak's trip to the council reflected Vytautas' policy toward Kyivan Metropolitanate, which culminated in the convening of the council in Novogrudok in 1415 and the proclamation of autocephaly for the eparchies under Lithuanian and Polish rule. The letters of the Synod of Novogrudok declared the autocephaly of the Metropolitanate and the abandonment of the Moscow Metropolitan, a nominal Kyivan Archbishop Photios the Greek. Council expressed a formal reason for the refusal from the fugitive metropolitans. In the epistles, the metropolitans were accused of abdicating Kyiv for Moscow and stealing the treasures of the Sofia Cathedral in Kyiv. Letters concerning the election of an autocephalous metropolitan were included into manuscript collections of various content that circulated in the Metropolitanate through the centuries. These letters were cited in the historical synopsis on the past of the Kyivan Metropolitanate in the 17th and 18th centuries. These letters were a manifestation of the ecclesiological individuality of Kyivan See. Since the second half of the 13th century, the titular metropolitans of Kyiv, in addition to the blessing of Constantinople, slide 4, please, slide 4. And now slide 5 also. Since the second half of the 13th century, the titular metropolitans of Kyiv, in addition to the blessing of Constantinople, received permissions to rule from the Golden Horde Khans, which were documented in the form of yarliks. Such documents were kept in metropolitan archives for centuries. In the mid-16th century, Metropolitan Makary of Moscow mentioned that the archives contained yarliks for the nominal metropolitans of Kyiv. Peter, Alexei, Michael, John, and Theognostus. Makary gives a detailed description of the content of the yarlik for Peter of Ratne from Khan Uzbek in the beginning of the 14th century. The yarliks usually exempted metropolitans from paying taxes in exchange for prayers for the Khan, his family, and his tribe. In the wreckage of the Rurikids family state, two metropolitanates emerged in the early 14th century as alternatives to the former center. Both metropolitans were ordained within the same year. The Halich Metropolitanate was established in 1303 under Emperor Andronicus II Palaeologus, and with the blessing of Patriarch Athanasius. Prince or King Yuri I, who petitioned Constantinople for the establishment of a metropolitanate, promoted the creation of Orthodox religious center in Halich. The Lithuanian Metropolitanate was also established in 1303. A year later, with the passing of the metropolitans of Kyiv and Halich, new candidates for these seats arrived in the Byzantine capital for confirmation and ordination. The records in the archives of the Patriarchs of Constantinople show that chrysobull was granted for the confirmation of the Metropolitanate of Halich, which included the bishoprics of Volodymyr, Przemysl or Peremysl, Lutsk, Turov, and Holm. The records also mention the Lithuanian Metropolitanate and the conversion of the local population. Substantial changes in the religious life of Orthodox believers and the organization of the church began in the mid-14th century with the consecration of Metropolitan Alexei, who settled mostly in Moscow and supported the expansionist politics of Vladimir's Prince Dmitry Donskoy. The liquidation of the Metropolitanate of Halich under Patriarch Isidore in 1347 resulted in the transfer of the bishoprics of Galicia, Volodymyr in Volhynia, Holm, Przemysl, Lutsk, and Turov to the titular Kyivan Vladimir Metropolitanate. Volhynian Prince Dmitro Lubartovich was notified of the liquidation of the Metropolitanate. The decline of the Metropolitanate took place again the background of the conquest of the Principality of Halich, in which the line of local dynasty became extinct. Those years, Galicia was subordinated by the Polish king Casimir the Great. The king appealed to Pope Clement VI to regulate church life. In his reply, the Pope mentioned the unfaithful inhabitants of Galicia and the 7 dioceses that was subject to the Metropolitan. Later on, in 1370s, King Casimir addressed his letter to Patriarch of Constantinople with a request to make ordination for Anthony as Archbishop to Halych. In other case, the king threatened to convert Ruthenians in Catholicism. The Patriarch Philotheos positively reacted to the king's request, besides pro-Moscow politics of the last decades concerning the Ruthenian lands that was confronted by the Duke Algirdas. One can assume that the prologue to such confrontation with Constantinople concerning the Metropolitan's nominations and the cooperation between Vladimir on Klязьма and Patriarchs was the case of earthquake that demolished Sophia Cathedral in Constantinople in 1345. Prince Simeon the Proud of Vladimir and Moscow, who supported the rebuilding of the cathedral with a large donation, also demanded the dissolution of the Halych Metropolitanate. The leader of the centralization processes for Moscow and Vladimir became Alexei. Slide 6, please. A nominal metropolitan of Kyiv who received his ordination in 1355. The same year, the Lithuanian Metropolitanate was revitalized. At the request of Algirdas, Roman became Metropolitan of Lithuania, initially with only 2 bishoprics, Polotsk and Turov, and then Novgorod and the bishoprics of Microrossia in Ukrainian lands were added to his authority. The competition between political and religious centers in the second half of the 14th century coincided with the rise of Turkish occupation of Byzantine lands and the discussions between elites of Eastern Empire. The discussions between hierarchs and adherents of union with Rome finished with the victory of proponents of contemplative orthodoxy that was a reaction on the growing threat of the Muslims. Slide 7, please. Prince Dmitry Ivanovich of Moscow tried to break the established political system of the Lithuanian neighborhood with the help of Metropolitan Alexei that Algirdas tried to complain to Constantinople. Metropolitan became a counterweight in the hands of the Vladimir and Moscow prince in his attempts to conquer the neighboring lands that had emerged into allied relations with the Lithuanian Duke. Initially, the Moscow prince tried to subdue Nizhny Novgorod, from which he demanded a cross-kissing or oath of allegiance. Nizhny Novgorod Prince Boris was married to Algirdas' sister Agrippina since 1351. In order to subdue Boris' principality, the envoy of Moscow, Prince Dmitry Ivanovich Abbot Sergejus, arrived in Nizhny Novgorod and invited Boris Konstantinovich to visit Moscow, but the proposal was rejected. Metropolitan Alexei responded to Boris' refusal by ordering the closure of all churches in the principality, and soon Moscow troops arrived at the walls of Nizhny Novgorod and forced Boris Konstantinovich to submit. The Grand Principality of Tver became the next victim of Dmitry Ivanovich policy. In 1368, Dmitry Ivanovich made his first attempt to subdue Tver. Before that, Metropolitan Alexei, guaranteeing protection to the local prince, invited him to Moscow, where he set off putting his trust in God and in cross-kissing. Upon arrival, Prince Mikhail Alexandrovich of Tver was imprisoned. Later on, he was rescued from captivity through the mediation of the Golden Horde, namely the intercession of Khan Charik. The Tver prince was released, but this didn't put an end to Dmitry Ivanovich's intentions to subdue the neighboring principality. Lithuanian princes were interlinked with the Tver prince house. The son of Tver's Grand Prince Ivan was married to a daughter of Duke Kęstutis, Mary, and the Prince Uliana of Tver was the second wife of Duke Algirdas. Slide 8, please. The release of the prisoner marked the beginning of the First Lithuanian War. Dmitry Ivanovich of Moscow waged war on Tver, whose prince had to flee to save his life. Mikhail Alexandrovich found refuge with his brother-in-law Algirdas, who in response marched on Moscow with his army. Algirdas began military actions accompanied by Kęstutis, Vytautas, Mikhail of Tver, and the Smolensk troops. Algirdas' allies' troops devastated the border towns, killed Prince Simeon Dmitrievich Starodubsky, called Kropyva, and in the Obolensk Principality they deposed Prince Konstantin Yulievich Obolensky. Having laid siege to Moscow, the Lithuanians stayed under the walls for 3 days, but had to withdraw due to lack of forces to attack. Metropolitan Alexei refused to come to Lithuania and generally sided with Moscow in the confrontation with the neighboring princes. In response to his refusal, Algirdas appealed to Constantinople for a separate metropolitan for the Ukrainian Belarusian lands. The circumstances of the Lithuanian-Moscovite confrontation are set out in a letter from the Grand Duke of Lithuania to Patriarch Philoteus in 1371, in which Algirdas justified the ordainment of a separate metropolitan for the Ukrainian lands and neighboring principalities under Lithuanian control. The power of the Lithuanian metropolitan had to extend to Kyiv, Smolensk, Little Rus or Mikrorossia, Novosil, Tver, and Nizhny Novgorod. The letter also mentions the treacherous capture of the princes of Tver and Nizhny Novgorod despite security guarantees from Alexei and the attack on Algirdas' son-in-law, Prince Ivan of Novosil, and the enslavement of his wife and mother. The letter contains an extensive list of cities captured by the Muscovites. Slide 9, please. The conquest of many Lithuanian cities by the Muscovites led Algirdas to launch an attack on Moscow again, which also had religious undertones. The Duke demanded that the Metropolitanate of Kyiv should not be dependent on one political center, but should take into consideration the interest of many centers. The titular metropolitan had to take into account the polycentric nature of the Kyivan Metropolitanate, whose bishoprics appeared in different principalities. In his correspondence with Constantinople, the Grand Duke noted that Metropolitan Alexei blessed bloodshed and refused to visit Kyiv and Algirdas himself. The Metropolitan exempted from responsibility the princes who swore allegiance to Algirdas by the cross-kissing. Ivan Kozelsky and Ivan Vyazemsky, but breached their obligations. In addition, Algirdas complained to Constantinople that the Metropolitan's refusal to bless the alliance of Veliki Novgorod and Lithuania to confront the Teutonic Order in Livonia led to the defeat, the Battle of Rudava on 17 February 1370. In turn, Constantinople didn't condemn the conflict between Moscow and Lithuania over Tver. In particular, in June 1370, the Patriarch rebuked the princes who opposed Dmitry Ivanovich of Moscow. They, like the Grand Duke of Smolensk, Sviatoslav, sided with the fire worshipper Algirdas. In response to the attempts to subdue Tver, the local Grand Duke of Tver, Mikhail Alexandrovich, made a decisive démarche and claimed the title of Principality, the Grand of Vladimir Onclasm. With this request, he went to the court where he received a yarlik from Khan Muhammad Bulak in the summer of 1371. The Prince of Tver invoked the precedent of his grandfather, who had received the yarlik for Vladimir and Moscow, and even defeated the combined army of Moscow and the Horde in the battle near the village of Bortenevo in 1317. As a result of this defeat of united troops, the wife of Moscow and Vladimir, Prince Yuri Danilovich, was captured. She was a sister of Golden Horde Khan Uzbek. She converted to Orthodoxy under the name of Agafia. From an early age, Dmitry Ivanovich had a problem with the ownership of the titular Principality of Vladimir, which was claimed by the Suzdal Prince Dmitry Konstantinovich. In 1362, both of them asked the court for a yarlik. The Muscovite did receive the appropriate yarlik, but Dmitry Konstantinovich didn't give up his hopes of becoming Grand Prince of Vladimir, and the following year he once again tried to seize the principality by force. Moscow's policy prompted Lithuania and its allied principalities to turn to Constantinople as another arbiter in their long-running disputes. Thus, in the letters of 1371 to the Patriarch Algirdas complained about Muscovite attacks on Lithuanians and Tver. It was emphasized that it was with the blessing of Metropolitan Alexei that the shedding of blood took place. Algirdas requested Constantinople again to send the Metropolitan for the bishoprics of Smolensk, Kyiv, Little Rus or Mikrorossia, Novosil, Tver, and Nizhny Novgorod. Lithuanian Duke also mentioned the treacherous imprisonment in Moscow of the princes of Tver and Nizhny Novgorod, who had arrived at the invitation of Metropolitan Alexei. Patriarch Philoteus had to summon the letter to Constantinople to answer Algirdas' appeals. The Patriarch ordained Cyprian Samblek as Metropolitan of the Belarusian and Ukrainian lands, limiting Alexei's power to Moscow and its allied principalities. Upon returning to Kyiv from Constantinople, the newly ordained Metropolitan began to restore the Lithuanian bishoprics. He ordained Bishop of Volodymyr in Volhynia and inspected the Metropolitan residences in Saint Sophia and of Kyiv and Novogrodok. With the death of Alexei, Cyprian was to take power over all bishoprics of the Kyivan Metropolitanate. However, a discussion in Constantinople about the canonical conformity of the ordination of two metropolitans to the same see stood in the way. Presumably, Cyprian sought to extend his authority to Great Novgorod, but was denied because of the pro-Moscow party in this city principality. Moscow did not recognize Cyprian as metropolitan because of the titular Kyivan Metropolitan Alexei, and set a protest to Constantinople. Slide 10, please. During Tokhtamysh attack on Moscow in 1382, Cyprian escaped to Tver, and Dmitry Ivanovich fled to Kostroma. With the restoration of the Horde's power in Moscow, coins with Arabic inscription glorifying Tokhtamysh began to be struck. From the mid-14th century, various principalities that were once under the influence of Rurikid's rulers minted their own coins. In Nizhny Novgorod, for example, Prince Dmitry Konstantinovich started minting his own coins. The minting of new coins by Volodymyr Olgerdovich Algirdas son is now believed to reflect the restoration of the Kyivan Metropolitanate with Cyprian Samblak. Therefore, the coins of the 1370s contain images of Christian symbols and even a certain Christian cathedral or altar in center. There is depicted the canopy, a usual element of medieval Byzantine iconography, also known in Kyiv. The crosses on the coinage have a shape similar to the Maltese crosses. The politics of restoring the Metropolitanate by Algirdas was also reflected on the coin. Lithuanian Duke began striking a coin depicting a spear with cross in 1376. During the horde's attack, Cyprian had escaped to Kyiv, where he stayed under the protection of Volodymyr Olgerdovich. Dmitry Donskoy searched for a new, most appropriate candidacy for the metropolitan seat. There were three candidates for the position of titular Kyivan Metropolitan: Pimen, Mityae, and Dionysius. The Moscow prince manipulated with position of metropolitan until his death. Cyprian Samblak returned to Moscow when Vasily Dmitrievich married Sofia Vitotovna and began to reign in 1389. After return in Moscow, Kyivan Metropolitan united all bishoprics of Old Metropolitanate under his rule. Conclusions. After the defeat of the family state of the Rurikids, new political centers and princely houses in the lands of Eastern and Central Europe began to claim leadership for the bishoprics located in their realms. Lithuanian authorities that became one of the most powerful centers in the region demanded from Constantinople a separate archbishop because the titular metropolitan of Kyiv moved to Moscow. One can see that the Prince of Vladimir and Moscow tried to manipulate with influences on the titular metropolitans of Kyiv. The question of influences on the principalities that were included into the Lithuanian neighborhood community in the last decades of the 14th and the beginning of the 15th century is still open for discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zema, for your detailed presentation and also for perfect timing. And please excuse me for not having mentioned the title of your paper in due time. So let me announce it now. Kyivan Metropolitanate between Byzantium and Lithuania in the 14th century. The Contradictions of Political and Religious Centers. And now, dear colleagues, I propose we ask questions right now, since the internet connection may become unstable anytime, so that Professor Zema has a possibility to answer our questions and to hear our comments. So I invite you to present your questions or comment on this paper. You're welcome.
Thank you for your detailed report delivered just now, and I have, as for starters, a short question. I wanted to know I ask you to clarify a little bit more. Why do you date the establishment of the Lithuanian Orthodox Metropolitanate to 1303? I ask this so because the general agreement tends to be in favor of a little bit later date, namely 1315, 1317. So could you be more specific on this topic? Thank you.
Well, yes, this talk, I diminished, originally this talk, this paper was up to 20 pages and I diminished it up to 5.5. Well, what I found in papers, in documents, was 1303, but I will check again this date. I must check it again. Thank you for this question. I will check this information. I must check this information again.
Thank you. More questions, comments?
Okay. No, I have a very short question. So, thank you again for your very dense communication. You mentioned in passing an imperial crucible that you described as such in relation to the establishment of either Metropolitancy of Halych and of future conversion of Lithuania. That is, my question is specifically what specific document you have in mind? What is this crucible? Thank you.
Well, it probably the crucible published in the bunch of documents that was published and just a moment, I must find. Well, I used published document in the bunch of documents of Constantinople Patriarchates.
But they, by definition, don't include crucibles.
Excuse me, could you repeat? I can.
Yeah, that is, they are from later period, and by definition they don't include crucibles because that's patriarchal documents that are collected there. So you can simply check, but I wonder what kind of specific document you could have in mind.
Mm-hmm. Well. Just
thank
a moment.
you. Just to say that the register starts by in documents of the year 1315. So if it's a document either from Patriarch or another in 3003, it will not be included, at least in the existing volume of the Eronkodikon. But I don't know if you have something else in mind.
You mean 1303 doesn't exist, or could you repeat, please?
The register that we have now, thank you. Yes, the register, the first volume, the first manuscript, Vidoponensis Historicus Grecus 47, starts with the year 1315 with John Glikis. Not in year 1303 with Patriarch Athanasius. And
yeah, sure.
If
Thank you.
It has survived,
check.
it has to be somewhere else, or in the original, or in another.
Yes, I must
yes.
check it more accurately. Thank you a lot for your comment.
More questions, comments?
Crucible. Okay, crucible.
Okay. If not, so I thank Professor Zema again for his presentation. And I would like to announce our next speaker today. Professor Gościwit Malinowski is the representative of the University of Wrocław. He is an internationally known classical philologist who is constantly interested in different topics like the antique and medieval geographical literature, the history of zoology, also different Oriental topics, and international relations and medieval and more recent history, very often focused on Poland and Lithuania. He is also the author of the book Helena Polonica, Miniatures from the Polish-Greek History. So, Professor Malinowski, so the floor is yours, and we will hear a paper entitled Lachia and Polania, Latin and Ruthenian as languages of communication between Poland and the Greek world in the 14th and 15th centuries. You're welcome, Professor Malinowski.
Thank you very much for this presentation of my person. I would like to be as excellent as you told about me. And I also want to thank to Darius Baronas for invitation for this splendid conference. And I hope this topic, this about Poland, would be some supplement to the main Lithuanian theme of this session. Lachia and Polania, Latin and Ruthenian as languages of communication between Poland and the Greek world in the 14th and 15th centuries. I apologize that I not included my abstract to the paper, but this is really recent studies. So some 2 weeks earlier, I have no idea what I will talk to you, but I am working on this instantly about the name of Poland and the questions concerning the Greek and Poland relations. So let me start. In the Vienna edition of Acta Patriarchatus Constantinopolitani by Miklosic and Müller, document number 318 published an undated letter from the king of Wlachia, Casimir, to our most holy lord, the ecumenical patriarch, thanks to whom Bishop Antonius arrived from there to be promoted to Metropolitan of Halič by decree of the Holy and Divine Synod. This is the first preserved letter written in Greek by a Pole, or possibly on behalf of a Pole to a Greek recipient. We do not know when Casimir the Great sent this letter, but it likely happened shortly before his death in November 1370. The king, irritated by the prolonged vacancy of the Halič metropolis, which had been abolished by Emperor John Cantacuzenos back in 1347, sent Bishop Antony of Halič to Constantinople to Patriarch Philoteus Kokkinos with a letter. We can be almost certain that Bishop Antony himself had a decisive influence on the final form of the letter, as evidenced by the incipit of the letter, to the one sitting in the first place, the most holy Patriarch of Constantinople. It is doubtful that King Casimir, a Latin Christian, would so openly negate the primacy of the Pope Urban V, even if the Pope was temporarily in captivity in Avignon. In the further part of the letter, Casimir, king of Lachia and Little Ruthenia, demands from the Patriarch, his father and archpriest, the promotion of the letter-bearer, a worthy man, good, of pure manners and humble heart, the most holy Bishop Antony, to the dignity of Metropolitan. Casimir the Great briefly recalls the history of the Halič metropolis. From time immemorial, Halič was called a metropolis in all parts and was the seat of the metropolis from time immemorial. The first metropolitan was Niphon, with your blessing. The second metropolitan was Peter. The third metropolitan was Gabriel. The fourth metropolitan was Theodore, all of whom were on the throne in Halič. To ensure the Patriarch does not doubt that King Casimir has the right to claim the Halič metropolis, he writes the following. The princes or kings of Ruthenia were our relatives, and those kings passed away from Ruthenia, and the land became widowed, and then I, king of Lachia, received the land of Ruthenia. In this way, the king of Poland reminds the patriarch that he is the rightful ruler of this part of Ruthenia. Rightful meaning as a result of the agreement made in 1338 at the Congress of Visegrad, a mutual inheritance agreement in the event of childless death between Casimir the Great, Charles Robert of Anjou, King of Hungary, and Boleslav George II Teutonovich, Prince of Halič-Volodymyr. By making this agreement, Boleslav George sealed the affiliation of Halič-Ruthenia to the political system of Latin Europe, in which such mutual inheritance agreements made between potentially childless rulers were a natural system of succession. In the remaining part of Ruthenia, despite the advancing territorial fragmentation, the principle of state dynastic domain prevailed, so that after the extinction of one line of Rurikovich, the domain would return to the common pool for division among the other lines. Of course, by 1338, the representatives of the Lithuanian Gedimin dynasty had already challenged the Rurikovich. The accession of Boleslav George II to power in the Principality of Halič-Volodymyr was already a denial of Ruthenian inheritance principles, as he was a Mazovian prince and a Rurikovich only through his maternal line. However, it was the takeover of the Principality in 1340 by Casimir the Great that was a complete denial of Ruthenian inheritance principles. Boleslav George competed for the Halič throne with two Silesian princes, Henry and John, while Casimir the Great had to contend with the Mazovian princes and Gediminid Lubard Dimitr. He compensated the former princes and waged war against the latter, which war lasted until 1349, when it ended with the division of the Principality. During this war, in the 1347, Emperor John Cantacuzenos abolished the Halič metropolis, informing the Metropolitanate of Kyiv, the Prince of Moscow, Simeon, and Prince Lubard of Volhynia by letter, but no letter was sent to Casimir the Great. He was likely omitted as a Latin Christian who was expected to soon lose the throne in Halič, just as Hungarian rulers before him had. However, the rule of Polish king in so-called Red Ruthenia, known in Constantinople as Little Ruthenia, distinct from Greater Ruthenia or the Kyivan metropolis, proved to be lasting. After over 20 years since the abolition of Halič metropolis, the Latin Christian ruler from Poland demanded the restoration of the metropolis for his Greek subjects. If the Patriarch did not sufficiently understand the necessity of restoring the metropolis in Halič, Casimir the Great ended his letters with the words, "If there is no grace of God and your blessing for this man," it means Bishop Antony, "then do not later mourn because of us, for it will be our necessity to baptize the Ruthenians in the Latin faith, if there is no metropolitan in Ruthenia, because the land cannot be without law." This final argument had a profound impact on the Patriarch, and by May 1371, the Holy Synod proclaimed Antony as Metropolitan, a decision for which the Patriarch had to explain himself in a letter to the furious Metropolitan of Kyiv, Alexios. In this letter, he quoted Casimir's threat of baptizing the Halič Ruthenians in the schismatic Latin faith, trusting that this would speak to the Orthodox heart of Alexios, the first native Muscovite in the office of the Metropolitan of Kyiv, which had been moved to Moscow in the 1325. Casimir himself died in November 1370 and did not live to see the revival of the Halič metropolis. His letter was entered into the register by some not very bright patriarchal secretary as the letter Pitakion of the king of Lachia, Casimir. After all, everyone in Constantinople had heard of Wallachia, but Lachia, as the name of a country, was something new. Previously, such a country was unknown in the Greek world. The name Lachia was derived from the Rus term Lachi, an exonym for Poles, likely by Bishop Antony, the translator for the letter into Greek and the candidate for the metropolitan position. In the patriarchal correspondence of 1371, this name, Lachia, appears in subsequent letters, but it later fades away. Leonikos Chalkokondylis is considered the last classical Greek historian, even though most of his life took place during the era of Turkish rule. His demonstration of histories comprises 10 books, in which Chalkokondylis presented the history of the Ottomans. This breaks with the Byzantine historiographical tradition that focused on the reigns of individual emperors. Leonikos' family belonged to old Athenian families. The most famous member of this family was Dimitrios Chalkokondylis, a student of Theodoros Gaza, a Greek humanist active in Italy, and a teacher of Renaissance figures such as Angelo Poliziano, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, Giovanni di Lorenzo de' Medici, later Pope Leo X, and Johannes Reuchlin. Leonikos did not achieve the fame of his cousin, but was influenced by Renaissance currents. In his historical work, he boldly drew on classical Greek historiography, consistently archaizing all possible names. Thessaloniki is Terme. The capital of Egyptian Mamelukes is not Cairo, but Memphis. And the dying empire is not Constantinople, but Byzantium. And because of this decision of Leonikos, we call all this period Byzantine. However, the most surprising thing was his archaizing of the names of peoples. Not only did he call Tamerlane forces the Massagetae, but he referred to the Greek populations as Hellenes, not Romans, as all Byzantine historians did, such as, for example, his contemporary historian Ducas. For Leonikos, the Romans were simply the inhabitants of Rome in Italy, governed by the archiereus. It means the high priest, it means the pope. Following Herodotus, Leonikos included many geographical and ethnographic descriptions in his work, seemingly leaving out no European people. Thus, he is the first Greek writer to describe the Poles. It is a brief description, but let us not complain. For the first time, we can learn how the Greeks saw us in the pivotal 15th century, pivotal for both them and us. He first mentions the Poles when he writes that the Tribalians, Mesians, Illyrians, Croats, Polans, and Sarmatians speak the same language. Interestingly, in this grouping, only the Croats and Poles have current names, while the other Slavic peoples are called very archaically. Serbs, Tribalians, Bulgarians, Mesians, Slavs from Bosnia and Dalmatia, Illyrians, and Ruthenians as Sarmatians. Leonikos writes that the Hungarian take their rulers from the reigning houses of Bohemians, Luxembourg, Germans, Habsburg, and Poles, Jagiellons, and that their language is unlike that of Bohemians, Germans, or Poles. He mentions that the Dacians, it means Wallachians, Romanians, speak a language similar to the Italians, and that to the north they have the Poles as neighbors, and on the east, the Sarmatians, Ruthenians. When characterizing the Poles directly, he writes, the Polans border the Sarmatians, Ruthenians, use their language, but in customs and lifestyles are similar to the Romans. Unfortunately, we do not know if the contemporary to Romans or ancient Romans. In Leonikos' work, Poland is consistently called Polania, and Poles are Polani. However, no earlier or later author uses such a name. Polania, like the earlier Lachia, is an exception in Greek designations for Poland. Let us see how other Greek authors name Poland, not limited to the late medieval period. The first name of Poland is in the work of Sylvester Syropoulos, Polonia, or nearly contemporary in translation of the Pope Nicolaus V letter, translation made by Theodoros Gaza, in the half of 15th century. However, earlier, Poland was called Lechia, and Poles were called Lechi. The first Greek author is Ioannis Kinnamos, and then Konstantinos Stilvis, Neophytos Prodromenus, and is now the gap between the 14th century and 16th century. What conclusions can we draw from this comparison? The original form of naming Poland and the Poles in Greek language is Lechi and Lechia. It was only in the 15th century that the form Polonia was first attested. This latter name was obviously taken from Latin or some Romance vernacular language. Under the influence of the adoption of the new name, Polonia, the word Lechia temporarily disappears from Greek literary monuments. It reappears in the 16th century as a synonym for Polonia, and it is more commonly used until the 19th century, when it again falls out of use. Before we draw further conclusions, let us examine the etymology and origin of the terms Polonia and Lachia. The name Polonia was adopted by the state of Boleslav the Brave at a very specific historical moment, after the martyrdom of St. Adalbert in 997, and before the Congress of Gniezno in 1000 year. The etymology of this name is traditionally derived from pole, field, whether in the sense that this country was flat and largely deforested, or that in this country, amidst the forest, one encountered open spaces called polana, or from the verb polakować, which means that the inhabitants of this country were known for their activities in the field. It means the raids and incursions on neighbors, or because the word pole was associated with a borrowing from Iranian languages of the word palanin, hero, a term not attested in corpus of Slavic texts, but known in the feminine form palanica, heroine, as also the word pehlavan, wrestler, or balvan, stone statue on the steppe, kuman polovcian baba. The ethnonym Polanin Polanus and the name Polonia and southwestward within the circles of Latin Christianity, encapsulated in the universalist system of imperial and papal power. However, among Poland's northern, eastern, and southeastern neighbors, this name spread with difficulty in a later period, or was not officially accepted at all. This was because these people languages already had another designation for the country and its inhabitants: Lędzianin, Lędzianie, Lęchi, Lechi. The name Polania, recorded by Leonikos, is not his invention. It is found in some very old records in Latin sources, at the some beginning of this term in European languages. However, in the 15th century, this version is absolutely rare, and it remains a question why Leonikos recorded Poland's name with an A, as it is written today in languages borrowing it from English: Chinese Bolan, Japanese Borando, Arabic Bulanda. Other Greek authors adopt this name in the form typical for the 15th century Latin, Polonia. However, the name Lechi, Lechia, coincides with the South Slavic Serbian form, but it also appears in Polish literature written in Latin since the time of the master Vincentius, writing at the same time as John Kinnamos. The form with an E, Lechi, is also found in Czech language, which may have some significance for Greek, as we will see shortly. The Ruthenian form of this ethnonym, Lachi, appears only in the record of the country's name made by Bishop Antony, a Ruthenian writing in Greek, whose Greek, as noted yesterday by Katerynie Miciu, is far from correct. Antony has poor knowledge of Greek and is unfamiliar with the Latin tradition of writing about Poland as Lechia, nor is he aware of the South Slavic, Czech Slavonic, and Serbian duplicate for Poles, Lędzianin or Lechi, Lechowie. In Greek tradition, however, the Serbian form is more important than the Ruthenian form in writing the name of Poland. The return of the name Lechia to the Greek language, seemingly abandoned in the 15th century under the influence of Latin and Romance languages, can be linked to the influences of vernacular Slavic languages, and Turkish, where Poland is called Lechistan. The first Pole noticed by Greek chroniclers was a crusader from the time of the Second Crusade, John Kinnamos, recounting events from December 1147, when the Germans retreated after a terrible defeat at Dorileum. John Kinnamos writes, "The Alamanes, it means Germans, as said, often defeated by the Persian, it means Seljuk Turks, having lost many of their own, abandoned the idea of crossing through Philomelion, modern Akshehir, turned back and arrived in Nicaea, Iznik, where they joined the Germans. Germans means French, traveling by road and other kings, who led a great army. One of them ruled over the Tsechi people, a king chosen by Conrad, another over the Lechi, who are a Scythian origin, living next to the western Huns, it means Hungarians. The German forces were commanded by the Roman king who never received imperial coronation, Conrad III, and the French by King Louis VII. Interestingly, the rulers of Tsechi and Lex accompanied the French at that moment, not Germans. The king of the Tsechi was Vladislav II, who was brought to the throne in Prague by his brother-in-law. Vladislav would be crowned king only in 1158, but John Kinnamos still referred to him as king, Rex Regas, from Latin rex, similar to how he referred to all rulers of Western countries. We do not know who the king of Lechi was. Kinnamos characterized the Lechi as an ethnos, fearing that his readers might not recognize the name. The Lechi are described as a Scythian tribe, with Kinnamos using the term Scythians to refer to nomadic Cumans as well as Ruthenians, living near the Taurus mountains. It means Carpathians. The association likely influenced his description of the Lechi, who were said to border the Western Huns. So this is the most important testimonies from Greek language about Poles, and the names which I, in my title, choose as the example, seems to be absolutely exceptional, not used by any other authors than Bishop Antony, author of the letter, and Leonidas Chalkokondylos was exceptional Greek writing author who wrote in archaic style, and because of his stylistic decisions, this session is called Byzantine. If not, we'll call, for example, Romania, as it was called in the time of medieval times, as the so-called Byzantines called them same, Romei, Romanias. But Leonidas is responsible for this modern terminology. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Malinowski, for your presentation, rich in detailed linguistic evidences. And now we have enough time for questions and comments. So you're welcome.
Can I stay here or? Oh, okay. Thank you very much for this very informative presentation. And I certainly don't contest your appreciation of the scribe who wrote the Pitakion as incompetent in the Greek nomenclature of Poland. But I think that the earliest mention of Lachia in Greek sources as Poland is about 1 century earlier than the evidence that you have quoted. What you presented is what is officially recognized as the earliest mention of Lachia in Byzantine sources. That's what I understand. Yeah, no, as you, with every reason, point out, one of the traditions that record this name is anti-Catholic polemics. And Lachia is attested as this name, with this name, but non-recognized as such, printed not with a capital, but printed with a small letter, because obviously the editor and the printer didn't know what the word means, but it is attested in the anonymous treatise Contra Francos. That's one of the earliest polemical compositions produced in the late 11th or very early 12th century. That is about a century earlier than what you quoted, and there already the Poles are quoted for their tremendous fasting capacity. They fast at Lent more than anybody else, which is remarkable and praiseful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for this addition, because it's my mistake that I do not focus on this topic. I decided to talk about the earliest mention from Ioannos Kinnamos, but it is in reality Lachia. This, you say anonymous, some authors say that it was written by Constantinos Silvis, Contra Latinos treatment. I suppose it's the same. The same work.
Same tradition, at least, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
definitely the date is late 11th century.
Mm-hmm. So Kinnamos is 20 years earlier, probably, because 1118 is his dating of this historical work. But thank you very much for this information. I will also focus on this religious treaty as well.
Thank you. Do you have more questions and comments? Yeah.
Maybe I will try to give you a question not related directly to Byzantium, but perhaps more related to Western Europe. And you were talking about the name of Poland as it appeared in relation to the martyrdom of Saint Adalbert. And I remember that in 1997, German historian Johannes Fried produced a very interesting and controversial article about the appearance of that name, Polonia, Polonorum, and he tried to relate the appearance of this name to the biblical imagery that was called in to explicate almost the newly converted country, so to say. And what is your opinion, so to say, if you are familiar with this paper of Johannes Fried that was produced in 1997, because it relates directly to the name of Poland as it is attested in Latin sources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is a very interesting question, but the name of Poland seems to be invented in one specific time. After the death of Saint Adalbertus, and before the meeting of the ruler of, not Poland at the moment, but Slavic country, and Emperor Otto III. So it was the 3 years. In that time was prepared some promotion company of new country, which were earlier known as, for example, Kingdom of Mieszko. It was the name of the ruler, or state of Gniezno from the capital, or the Slavic people called Licikaviki. Probably it is the Liścikowice. It means some patronymicon of the Piast dynasty. Piast dynasty was never called Piast before the 16th century, as Byzantium was never called Byzantium before 16th century. It was called just Polish dynasty, that's all. The same with the Przemyslic, which was Czech dynasty, and I'm not sure, maybe Rurikowicz also were not called Rurikowicz at the beginning. So it was some action which was organized in Rome when the life of St. Adalbertus was written by John Canaparius, the Benedictine monk, and with assistance of the embassy from future Poland, led by envoy of Bolesław Bogusz. And there are many strict information in this first life. For example, the name of the city Gdańsk. It's not easy for foreigners to pronounce. Danzig in German. It is written exactly in Latin, Gdańsk, in Slavic. So this was the decision of Bolesław, probably, to promote a new name for the country, which was earlier known only as Sclavonia, but Sclavonia was huge. Many countries belong to Sclavonia. So this is the new name. And the idea of this German scholar is interesting, but it was earlier, even in the Baroque time, invented by Polish scholars, but it is some Waronian, false etymology. Polacz, it means to pour water on somebody. But the pour water is the custom of baptism in our times, for babies, for infants. But if Mieszko or other converts in that times was adults. So it was not the idea to pour water on them, but to baptize them, sink in the huge basin or even in the river. So it is impossible. And the name Pole in Polish language, it's really very interesting because it is the field, but it is also pole as an area. And this is also a Russian or Ruthenian word, polakować. It means to fight against in the field. This word Polak in the Serbian, which means the guardian of the ship, and who is in the mountains, and is also in Russian Byliny, the female version, Palanica, it means heroine, but the male version, Palanin, is lacking. So probably this was invented, this was borrowed from some Oriental languages, some steppe nomad languages, where, for example, the typical word is pahlavan, hero in the Persian. From this language is wrestler, pehlvan. In Bulgarian language, it's but of course via Turkish, and also balvan. Balvan, it means the idol in Slavic languages. So the name of Poland is not easy to explain etymologically, but it is very easy to find a genesis of this name. So it's not a traditional tribal name, it's not a very old name, but it was invented like, for example, the names for the countries in Latin America, for example, Venezuela, Bolivia, Colombia. So in the beginning of the 11th century, the name of Poland was invented. And this is the idea of Professor Przemysław Urbańczyk. Many Polish scholars are against it, but in my opinion, it's absolutely convinced because the evidence of sources, testimonies is clear. Before this date, no mention about Poland, and after this year, there are dozens of mentions of Poland as the new name was invented. So 10 years before the name of Litwa was first time testified by the Bruno of Querfurt, and Bruno from Querfurt was the main propagator of this name. It's some evidence how he journeyed around Europe And when he journeyed, the name of Poland was used in the local chronicles or some other texts.
Thank you so much for this wonderful paper. I really learned a lot about this problematic. I just wanted to restore the, let's say, the abilities of the patriarchal scribes. Probably he was tired or something happened. I cannot believe that, because if you check the text, it's actually very, very well written with the title of the Didachion. Perhaps it was something unknown to him and he made the mistake, or simply he was tired. There are many reasons why a scribe can make a mistake. So I don't think we are having in front of us let's say, a scribe that doesn't know what he's writing, or, they were high qualified persons. Probably he didn't recognize Lachia, and perhaps it will be interesting to see if there was a document ahead of that regarding Lachia, mode of Lachia or something, and sometimes human mind can confuse things and words. So I try to say that he was definitely a very capable person, but perhaps this Polish element was an unknown to him, and we don't have so many documents in the register about Poland in this time, and it was really something unique probably for the scribe to find in a document this term. I just try to justify the form we have in the title. Thank you so much.
Is it true that in this collection there's the only mention about Poland? Earlier, Casimir was not informed about the decision to abandon the Halič metropolis, to cancel it. Thank you very much for this defense. And I can add that Lach and Vlach are very similar, and in Slovenian language, Lach, it means Italian, because V at the beginning of this name disappeared, and still only Lach.
A very naive question from a non-specialist on this realm. As far as I understood, the first mention of the invention of the name Polania was connected to the Saint Adalbert. My question is, where had anybody have anybody had a suggestion that it could have been connected with the mission of Saint Adalbert, who was initially sent on the request of the Princess Olga and was not mentioned to baptize the Polish lands, but to baptize the Kyivan Rus lands, and the area of Kyiv was settled by the Polani. So could it be maybe some relationship to the initial mission of St. Adalbert? Mm-hmm. Have you already read or heard some hypothesis about this?
No, there's not connections, because those St. Adalberts and the Princess Olga was another Adalbert. This is the Czech origin bishop of Prague, who is called Wojciech, and he was named Adalbert as a Christian name to honor the first Adalbert. So this is only this connections between them. But concerning Polania in Kyiv, it's much more interesting question. There are typical etymology that Polania near Kyiv are in opposition to Drevlanie. Drevlanie in forests and Polanie in the fields. However, in my opinion, it could be also a possibility that those Polanie were also some borrowing of this Iranian or Turkic term Polanie as the heroes, as the name of the troops of the princes who were very important in that time. There is a description of the Ibrahim ibn Yaqub, Arabic tradesman, who wrote how Mieszko, the first historical ruler of Poland, focused to his troops, his drużyna in Polish, as I suppose in Russian also. So it could be some similarity that at the beginning it was that dukes or princes or troops, and later when it was forgotten, the normal association was Polania to the Pole as field, both in Kyiv as in Poland, because there is no other name for the country where Mieszko established his kingdom.
I have one question and one remark, and I will start for remark. In Rus word liachy, there actually is letter use, which is the nasal, so Polish nosówka. So it should be read as on, so lęchy, ląchy. So it's very similar to lechy. And with this remark, I have one question. Could you tell me something, or what do you think about hypothesis of Jacek Banaszkiewicz? This hypothesis is similar to hypothesis, Gołąb hypothesis, beginning Gołąb hypothesis, that this word is as, they identify this word as eponym of the first ruler of Poland, Lech.
There's two questions. Of course, it was at the beginning Lech in Slavic languages, but in the beginning of the 12th century, this nasal vowel was shifted to the not nasal. And in Ruthenian language, it was a, liachy, but in the South Slavic languages, in Czech or Serbian, it was e. Also in Icelandic, Nordic languages, it's lesir, without this n. However, there are some traces in Lithuanian that in the beginning it was the nasal element in Lithuanian name Lenkas. It was borrowed probably from Ruthenian language before this vowel shift was made in the 12th century. But concerning Banaszkiewicz's theory, my opinion is that he is right in the connection between Poles and the mythical rulers, but it is the names of the rulers are from the name of Poles, not the name of Poles from the names of the rulers, because in those rulers, in my opinion, are invented persons. Invented as some fictitious literary eponyms of Poland, and I rather connected with the word lędzianie, because in the Russian language the adjective of Polish is liadzki with de, and like in the lędzenini, even in the Hebrew language, leczenin is written. Lędziel in Hungarian, and also in Serbian languages, there are doublets. So, in my opinion, the mythical kings of Poland, or the rulers of Poland, princes of Poland, Lechs, are fictitious persons invented by chroniclers, maybe the first by Byzantine. The first, yes? Mm-hmm. And later it was accepted, and there are many, even 9 Lechs in some Renaissance history of Poland. In that way, rather.
So, thank you. Now Professor Zema has something to tell us. Valerii?
Yeah, I'm here. Maybe I lost. Did you mention about Polania that they are also on pages of early Kyivan chronicle mentioned? The phrase is linguistic similarity between Slavonic, Ruthenian or Rus language and Polania, also Polania. It's Ипатьевский летопись It's on the page of Ipatьевский letopis, the beginning of the 12th century.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's interesting that in the first Nestor wrote about Polani, and this example that such a tribe existed in Kyiv, in Ruthenia, was the proof for Polish scholars that the similar tribe should exist in Poland in the prehistoric, we can call proto-historic times. But in my opinion, the Polish Polania as a tribe never existed, and of course those in Kyiv are well testified in the Ruthenian sources. If I answer the question, sorry.
Right. Thank you. More questions, comments? No. So thank you very much for your presentation, Professor Malinowski. And now we will have a coffee break, and our next session will start at 11 sharp. Thank you.